From the external, labia major, labia minor. That is the clitoris right there. Across here is a partial membrane called the hymen, which is completely broken apart during first intercourse. This is the vagina. This rounded portion and opening is the cervix. These are the fornix. There is a posterior fornix and an anterior fornix. They're simply recesses. And the cervix is the opening to the uterus. Now the uterus has a rounded portion, which is the fundus, and the body, and then the beginning, the cervix. It has three layers. It has an endometrium, the inner portion. That is the portion that builds up and sloughs off during menstruation. It has a myometrium, which is smooth muscle, which is going to contract to expel the baby. And then it has a perimetrium, or outside of the uterus. The uterus overlies the bladder, and as you can see, this is a very small uterus. It's going to enlarge as the baby enlarges and compress the bladder. And so females who are pregnant have to go to the bathroom often. Attached to the uterus is the fallopian tube. Now, the fallopian tube surrounds the ovary. At the sites of ovulation, the fallopian tube develops finger-like projections to catch the ovulated oocyte, called fimbriae. It then goes to an infundibulum, and then to an ampulla, and, then to the fallopian tube proper, and then to what's called the isthmus, where it joins with the uterus. And this, of course, is the ovary. I need to look and see if there are some other models that are going to show some things a little bit better, because there's a lot of ligaments in here that model does not show very well. So let me take a look and walk around. No, this is not going to show it. Here we go. So here's the fallopian tube. Okay? So this would be the ovarian ligament that attaches the ovary to the uterus. This would be the uterine ligament. In the posterior, there is a sacrouterine ligament on either side. Sacrouterine ligament, and then all of this is the broad ligament. Okay? The broad ligament would have parts that are attached to the ovary, mesovarium, parts that are attached to the fallopian tube, mesocephalinx, and parts that are attached to the uterus, mesometrium. Okay? So those would be the parts of the broad ligament. In addition to that, the blood vessels that are attached to the fallopian tube are carried in a ligament called the suspensory ligament, because this is how the fallopian tubes are. Now, you couldn't hold your hands up like this all day long, much less 24/7 for the rest of your life. So there has to be something holding the fallopian tube, and that would be the suspensory ligament. Okay? And that also helps to carry the blood vessels. Okay? Here are the ureters, okay, which are going to go to the bladder, which is going to be underneath. There's the bladder. Okay? That's not going to work. Let's do this for the time being. Nope, not that one. Perimetrium, myometrium, endometrium. The endometrium has two parts, the basalis and the functionalis. The basalis and the functionalis. The basalis always remains. A part of the functionalis always remains, but it is the functionalis that grows and develops blood vessels which the developing zygote can embed itself into. Okay? It is a part of the functionalis that builds up and sloughs off during the menstrual cycle. There's two cycles. There's the menstrual cycle and there is the ovarian cycle. Let's go to the board.
Oh, sorry.
Ladies, you develop all of your oocytes and all of your primordial follicles in utero when you are a fetus. You develop millions of them. But by the time you reach puberty, only about 400,000 are left. Now, puberty to menopause, 1 per month, under the influence of primarily FSH and secondarily LH, is going to mature. And the maturation process goes from primordial follicle to primary follicle, which is building up of follicular layers around the oocyte, with a clear layer separating the oocyte from the follicles, and that clear layer is the zona pellucida. As the follicle grows, the egg doesn't really grow at this point, but as the follicle grows, there develops an antrum. The antrum grows and grows and grows. The follicle gets nearer and nearer and nearer to the edge of the ovary. And then finally, under the influence of luteinizing hormone, ovulation occurs. The egg, with its surrounding layer, okay, of follicles, is expelled. Now, that surrounding layer of follicles is called the corona radiata. And the sperm are going to have to penetrate the corona radiata, the zona pellucida, until one sperm can finally penetrate the oocyte's membrane. Now, this oocyte has half the amount of chromosomes, just like the sperm has half the amount of chromosomes. The sperm does this spermiogenesis. This from here to here takes about 72 days. Okay? From primordial follicle, okay, in utero to here, okay, takes years. Takes years. As this primordial follicle becomes a primary follicle, meiosis 1 starts. Meiosis is reduction of chromosomes. And meiosis has 4 stages: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. Okay? This goes into meiosis 1 and goes into suspended animation. Okay? That's once a month. Okay? And then at puberty, as it starts developing, it completes meiosis 1, goes into meiosis 2, and stops part of the way through meiosis 2, and again is in suspended animation. And meiosis 2, the final reduction in the amount of chromosomes, is not going to take place until the egg is fertilized. To me, it's a wonder that any of us are here. It is such a complicated process. Okay? And it's happening, you know, even though it started in utero, it doesn't finish until fertilization. There is so much that could go wrong. It's a wonder that any of us are here. Now, your viable years that you produce eggs are, that you produce viable eggs, used to be considered up to age 40. Even though you may not have menopause for much, much later, the older the eggs are, the more the propensity to have problems with the child, such as Down syndrome. These days, they're saying 35 is really a good cutoff age to ensure that any children that are born are not going to be born with some of those kinds of deficiencies. And yet I have a patient, she is 50, and she is trying to have her first child. Now, they have examined her ovaries, and they have said there are at least 4 good eggs left. Okay. So what their plan is artificial insemination. Okay. Their plan is going to be artificial insemination. Okay. Remove one of the eggs, inseminate it with the sperm, okay, and then put it back in the uterus at the appropriate time when the uterus is built up, and let it implant. Okay? And even there, implantation is not guaranteed, because this fertilization, okay, finally breaking it apart, acrosome breaks through,